Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Butler from NetDimensions, and over the next 20 or so minutes, I'm hopefully going to talk myself out of a job, because I'm going to argue that the LMS systems are probably going to die or evolve to some extent. You probably won't recognize them. If I don't talk myself out of a job, you still want to know about LMSs beyond the next 20 minutes to actually understand behind you there on number 13. But reserve judgment until the end of the 20 minutes and see what you think. So what are we going to discuss? I'll look at some of the evolving changes within LMS over the last few years, particularly around social media and the use of social learning and informal learning within LMS. And that's always been like the utopian dream of an LMS to incorporate informal learning. And touching on that, I'll touch on the new Tin Can API or the Experience API that many also refer to as. I'll also touch on the importance of SaaS. Go back 5 years or so ago, most of the systems are on-premise. There you go. Got more technology now. But now the prevalence of SaaS is permeating throughout the industry. Also, what regulatory compliance means for LMS, and does it give it a future? LMSs originally came out of the compliance space, and also how other LMSs, how LMS should interact with other systems, and also how you get some form of return on investment from the LMS or return on expectation from the system. And last but not least, I'll touch on some novel uses of how an LMS can be used within various businesses around the world. So, where did the LMS start from? In the good old days, it was just classroom registration, administration, training management systems, booking systems. And then when I started off, originally it was computer-based CD learning, then web learning, online learning, then blended learning, and learning anytime, anywhere. So the 6 trends we're going to discuss are informal, social, mobile, extended enterprise. I'll touch on that in a bit more detail later on, but it's essentially the idea of using your LMS as a profit center, generating income from the LMS. The old fundamentals of compliance, but also compliance is giving new technologies, new ways of modalities of learning for LMS as well. It's where the money's been spent, and also integrated talent management. Informal social learning, it's been on everyone's lips for the last few years. It's been the buzz. All the figures from IDC and Forrester, etc., around about 70–75% of learning inside a business is informal. How do you capture that in a very structured, formal LMS? It's kind of the argument primarily behind, is an LMS relevant today? Being blunt, when I want to learn something, I work for an LMS company myself. I go online, I go to Google, I go to YouTube, that's where I learn. I don't typically go into the LMS. So probably I should stop talking now and go home, because I really am now on the job. But the prevailing trend now is to make things more socialized, to incorporate these modern modalities of learning, be it LinkedIn, YouTube, Google, whatever it is, within the LMS. But also, how do you know the provenance of the information that people are searching for when they go online? How do you know the information is accurate when they go online to find information? If they're representing your company, you have a legal responsibility behind that. There's also a very big argument around whether the LMS should be the social platform within an organization. Why would the training platform within a business be your email system of choice? Why would it be your database of choice? Why would you make the assumption the LMS should be the social platform of choice? People particularly using LinkedIn, Facebook as other social mediums, why would you expect them to use another social platform within the learning management system? So the 2 schools of thought are either you plug your LMS out into the likes of Twitter feeds or LinkedIn with an open API, which I'll touch on later on, or that the LMS is the social bedrock of the business, is where informal learning and knowledge will be shared within an organization. What's changed this, and I'll only touch this over a couple of slides, is what the ADL refer to as the X API or the Experience API. I think what everyone else in the room probably knows is Tin Can. In the US, they like to call it the X API, a nice little acronym. Tin Can is what we know it is here. The idea behind this is it will finally plug that dilemma of the informal and the formal within an organization. A good example of how Tin Can work within this environment is my example of when I want to find something out, I want to learn something, I quite often just go on to Wikipedia and I look it up on Wikipedia, especially if I know nothing about the subject at the beginning. Wikipedia just gives me like an idiot's guide to what a subject's about, and I go and I learn about it from Wikipedia. If you're using Tin Can or the Experience API, within your browser bar, you can have a little tab, a little button, and click Read it and understood it. And then that will push through into what's referred to as the Learning Record Store, and then that can be fed through to your LMS of choice if your organization's using one. It's those tiny little things that actually make Tin Can very relevant to bridging the gap between informal and formal. Tin Can's relatively new. We only got the, well, in fact, everyone here, only got the formal structure of the Tin Can API in the last couple of months or so. So we have the full Tin Can functionality, the full API behind that, available from, I think, September. And so it's relatively quick. The other big impact of Tin Can as well is it's not held back by the web browser. What I mean by that is when you work with an LMS, everything's through a web browser, be it Internet Explorer, Mozilla, Firefox, Chrome, you're going online. Tin Can allows you to bypass the web browser and connect directly to the Learning Record Store within an app. So those apps could be on, in a software application, they could be on a tablet device, an iPad, a Google Android. They can be apps within another LMS. They could be apps anywhere. There's no need to use a web browser. This opens up a whole new world, a whole new context to how you can treat learning and outside of an LMS. So mobile means many different things, and we'll touch on that in a moment, but serious gaming technologies. There's a chap here earlier on from Atari did a talk, and we see within the military, serious games are very much the prevailing trend, and there's a lot of possibilities within the gaming technologies that have really been opened out by the use of Tin Can. And social media as well. It opens up a new avenue within social media. That dilemma that I spoke about no more than 5 minutes ago, whether social belongs within the LMS or it's best of breed, it's kind of largely redundant now with Tin Can. Anything is possible. So just get a little bit of feedback from the audience here. It'd be good to see, I think just yes or no's actually, because we can't do not sure's, we don't have a voting technology today, but hands up who's actually incorporating social learning and social methodologies in their learning at the moment. Hands up. A few. Social learning is like one of those hot subjects people often talk about, but very less people actually doing it. The trouble is trying to actually work how you work within a formal aspect within an organization. Another area that people, maybe if I came here 3 years ago, it'd be like social learning. Everyone would be talking about mobile learning. No one would actually be doing it. Now, there's a slide about hands up and mobile learning. I expect maybe half the audience put their hands up. But if you look at now, about a third of the workforce is truly mobile. Everyone in my company actually is mobile. If everyone came to the office, we wouldn't fit in. They'd be standing on the streets outside. We physically do not have an office big enough to hold the staff because we expect them to be on the road, working from home, working at client sites, and we're no different to maybe many of our clients. But the other thing as well is, what does mobile mean? I mean, people think it means like a smartphone device. So most LMSs can render the screen footprint to the device size they're using. It'll detect whether it's an iPhone 5 or 4, an Android or BlackBerry, and it'll size automatically to the screen size. It'll also present another style sheet to be used on that interface as well. Whether an application can be used offline as well as offline on tablets. Going into a corporate environment 3 or 4 years ago, you would never see a tablet. Now when I go into a boardroom, 2/3 of the people around the table are using a tablet. It's a very different, it's a big change in the last 2 or 3 years. There's one other aspect as well, is you can potentially put even an LMS on a USB stick these days. We have clients who run the LMS completely remotely on a USB. So there's many different options, and mobile means many different things to different people. So, as I touched on, that connectivity is not ubiquitous. Here in London, we've got 4G now, pretty much anything is possible. But I'm not going to ask this question because I think the answer is going to be yes on mobile. But if you look at a business like Fugro is one of those big companies that people have never really heard of, but they are huge in their space. They are the supply chain to oil and gas. They're 13,500 people. They've got their own fleet of ships. They've got their own fleet of aircraft. And they've got people out in oil rigs, people out in boats, people out in the desert, people in the North Sea. Getting 4G on their mobile phone isn't really an option. They're completely disconnected. So in that context, they need a learning solution where it can be for a disconnected audience. So they run an instance of the LMS on a USB stick that works remotely on their supply chain boats. And when it comes back into an air connectivity, it will sniff the detection. It'll push information back up, and it'll push the data back down for the users and new content. So this is what I mean, where mobile doesn't just mean people's mobile phones, iPads. Everyone assumes it means that, but the real world, where the real business has been done on mobile, is often less sexy than an iPad or an iPhone or a Google Samsung device or something. Another great example is Cathay Pacific. This is an organization I think most of you heard of. You know, if you want to fly out to Hong Kong or the Far East, you know these guys. Their challenge is, when you buy an aircraft, it's a bit more complicated than buying a car. So they were going from 747-400s to 747-8s. There's a big difference between a Dash 4 and a Dash 8. You have to recertify if you're cabin crew, flight crew on the aircraft, and there's a huge amount of e-learning that comes with that type rating when you switch from aircraft to aircraft. And that is bandwidth heavy. And with people always on the road, the only way to do it is via e-learning. And actually Airbus and Boeing, when they sell an aircraft, they sell huge packages of e-learning content with it as well. And what these guys did, they had the LMS work on a USB stick, the pilots did the training, and cabin crew did the training offline on USB, and really old school. When they got back to headquarters, they just chucked the sticks back in a bowl as they came back into the base, and they synced it back up. Really old school, but it's the only way they could make it work. The content was too heavy to be even held locally on people's laptops. And also, the airline doesn't supply laptops for that purpose. They're locked down, EFB flight bags. Yet again, another change, which makes me think, are things changing, or evolving, or dying? SaaS and the LMS. I've got a few grey hairs in my head, and when I started out in the software business, everything was CapEx spend. What I mean by that is people were buying software and then writing down software over a number of years. It was a capital investment for a company. The trend now is for software as a service, but realistically, what does that mean? The company I work for, NetDimensions, is very much focused on high security, high risk, compliance orientated businesses. So we work with defense, we work with airlines, audit houses, banking, finance, etc. And security is important, and people get paranoid on SaaS. SaaS is secure, but not all SaaS is the same. So you had the various standards around ISO accreditations and SAS 70. That will differ from geographic region to geographic region. In the US, it's SAS 70. In UK and Europe, and actually globally, ISO 27001 is the standard of choice that most people work with. Now, compliance is probably the dreariest subject in training and development. However, I love it. This is when my voice picks up a bit and I get all excited in a high-pitched voice. Compliance for me is great, because compliance is, to me, a bit like Formula One in the automotive industry. In Formula One, they chuck all the money in Formula One. It's dead boring. The cars just go around in circles for an hour and a half, but it's pretty dull, but a lot of money is chucked into it. The same thing with compliance. You get a lot of new features, a lot of new functionality driven by compliance, because there is no grey area. It's very binary. It's zeros and ones. Either you pass, you fail, you're compliant, or you're not compliant. So businesses invest in it. So we do a lot of work within compliance, but we do work outside of compliance. So things like access control and e-signatures. This directly comes from the compliance arena, but e-signatures are now being used within performance appraisals, within the retail sector, within hospitality. It counts as a legal signature, but an e-signature within an LMS is the first time that someone can legally sign a document within an LMS. So it's a big change. So we see clients using it within a franchise management system, for example. When someone's signing up to become a franchise, they have to do franchise training to be the franchisee. They have to be a certain standard. They can even sign off the franchise agreement within the LMS. That's a trickle-down effect of compliance. Now, the nitty-gritty on compliance is a company like Fresenius. They are like Fugro. They're one of those big companies that most people have never heard of, but they are huge. They're about 140,000 people these days. They do medical devices, dialysis machines, etc. So their emphasis is making sure that every dialysis machine that they make is perfect. The consequences of getting it wrong with a dialysis machine are huge. If you are undergoing kidney treatment in the NHS in the UK, you're using a Fresenius equipment. They're that big, dominant, that everyone will be using Fresenius equipment. There's a legal requirement for them to be audited by the Food and Drug Administration in the USA or the EU equivalent is GMP. There's lots of acronyms in compliance. You can't work in compliance unless you use 3 or 4 letter acronyms. But the 21 CFR Part 11 means electronic records, e-signatures, auditing and reporting. It's this trickle down of functionality that comes out of compliance and benefits everyone else, hence the Formula One analogy. So what's different in highly regulated industries? Well, 5 main things really. One is authenticity. You have to be able to validate who a user is. Within airlines, we can fix down an exam down to an IP address of someone accessing an exam. So we can really lock it down very tightly to what they're doing. The integrity, I mentioned earlier on about SaaS, ISO 27001. It's a standard around data security. People want to know that. When we work in defense, it's a mandatory requirement. Confidentiality, it's not a flippant thing. Everyone in this room is bound by the data privacy regulations within the EU and their reflective legislation in each EU country. In the UK, we have the Data Protection Act of 1998. We're all bound by it. The consequences of getting it wrong are severe. And availability around it, having the proper infrastructure on your SaaS to support that. The dull things behind it, but the important things, are auditability. Can you track and report what people have done? This is the genesis of where an LMS came from. It's not, I said, the most exciting things. It's a bit I like, but this actually is where LMSs came from in year 0. And it probably is where they keep being invested from in the future. Another element behind it is the ever-evolving compliance regulations, be they 21 CFR Part 11 or aviation standards or the newly regulated financial standards in the UK, like the Retail Distribution Review that's been rolled out in UK finance. Extended enterprise is another way that LMSs have reinvented themselves. To be honest, 5 years ago, no one had a clue what extended enterprise was. In a nutshell, the simplest way of describing it is making money from your LMS. And a significant portion of our new clients are not using the LMS internally. They're pitching the LMS externally at their supply chain or their key clients or their distributors. And I mentioned franchise networks. We have a number of franchisee organizations who use it for training their franchisees. But the logic behind that is quite a simple one. If you have a supply chain, why bear the cost of training your supply chain to do business with you? Especially in a compliant arena, they should be paying to do business with you. And that's the key principle behind this. And the workflows within LMS make sense of that. An LMS is designed around an organization taxonomy. It's got the rules-driven behavior within the system to create that workflow going through. And it's a relatively simple thing. When you take in a course, it's no different really to being on Amazon and putting a product in a shopping basket. You're selecting a course rather than selecting a book or electronic item. And with the use of e-signatures and payment gateways for doing credit card transactions, you can do business to consumer. Because an LMS can be hooked into the back end, for example, to an SAP system, you can do business to business. So if you look at this diagram here, you've got the LMS sat in the center, and up the top left here, we have the more traditional view of the LMS for the internal customers, measuring return on investment. But if you're pushing the LMS out externally, you can be doing customers in a B2B and a B2C context. You could be serving a franchise model. You could be doing your channel to market, and I'll touch on Progress Software, who use this for their channel to market or to their supply chain. And a great example of the supply chain is the BBC Academy. The BBC actually is the largest training organization in the world for media. You know, we all know and love them for great TV and great programs, but they're actually one of the world's largest training organizations. They have a big training arena called the Academy, and they position this out to effectively train their supply chain. Most of the programs you watch on the BBC are, well, many of them are actually made by third-party companies, but they have to comply with the editorial standards of the BBC. And also the BBC is training up independent contractors, cameramen, people at Sky, Channel 4, etc. They're a big dominant force in that marketplace. And they can take purchases for either via a credit card or in a business-to-business context as well. So you're free to log on to this website. If you want to buy a camera course for a couple of £1,000, knock yourself out, you can get your credit card out and you can buy it online. What you're also seeing here is a portal-style interface. And one of the things I will be touching on in a few moments is the idea that people don't care about an LMS anymore. They don't want to be seeing an LMS. They just want to be seeing the information that's useful to them. And by the use of building portals, that's what you're able to do. This, in fact, is part of the BBC website, but it's an LMS that's powering the content underneath this. There's also been a strong move to integrated talent management, and that's part of the evolution of an LMS, and that's why they're not dying as well. 6 years ago, performance management, talent management was talked about, but now LMSs are hardly ever talked about. It's almost like a dirty word within the industry. Everyone wants to say their talent management or their performance management. Well, we say the same. You probably find a lot of branding about talent management and performance management rather than an LMS. And it's the natural evolution from recruiting, onboarding, learning, performance management, succession planning, compensation. It is a broader story of talent management. And that's the LMS have evolved within the arena. But this is a great example, actually, of a company that has used an LMS and performance management internally, as well as with the extended enterprise. Progress Software, a very large US-based software company, used the LMS initially to train its distribution channels on how to use the software and how to sell the software, and to certify the salespeople and the engineers within the distribution channel. They then used it to train their clients. So when clients bought software from them, the clients could get a token, basically a coupon code. If you buy software from Progress Software, you get a coupon code with the software you bought. Enter the coupon code into a website, and up pops the appropriate training for the exact product that you bought. And from that, they then pivoted back internally and used it for performance management inside the business. So the key question for me is, am I out of a job? I probably am out of a job anyway, but are these things going to evolve or happen anyway? There's been a lot of new trends within how an LMS is actually used. There's key drivers for that change, and I think one of those key drivers, and one of the biggest changes within our industry, is one we don't really know the impact of yet, and those are the couple of slides I showed at the very beginning about the Experience API or Tin Can. You're probably sick to death of presentations on what Tin Can means and how it's going to change businesses. I think the honest answer is no one actually really knows yet. We have the obvious use cases for using mobile apps, for tagging things within the web browser, but it's only when our clients start using Tin Can that we'll actually know the possibilities and how it can be used. As a software company, we are limited by our imagination. So I think if I come back here again next year and we did a similar presentation, it would be completely different. And I think it's because of Tin Can. So you're going to pretty much most of the companies in this room are ready to go with Tin Can. We're not unusual in that. Everyone was sitting on the fence ready for the ADL to release a full spec 2 months ago. They have now. So you, as clients, will be able to start using it in the next month or so. So what does it mean and how does it actually work? Well, these are the things I'd ask you to take away with you. Unless your LMS is going to be extinct within a year or so, you need to make sure that you've taken care of these things. And when I talk about an open system, I'm not necessarily talking about open source, because there's inherent security risks in open source. But I'm talking about the ability to highly configure the software and also pull elements of the software out. So, for example, that BBC Academy website I showed you, we have an open API, which all it means is you can suck out pieces of functionality of the software and embed them in third-party websites. I prefer the X API wording, but it's Tin Can. That's what it means. Experience API or Tin Can is the same thing. So make sure that your system supports Tin Can. It generally is one of the biggest changes in how learning can be accessed within industry for several years. The last one was mobile, but everyone's very comfortable with mobile. We know what mobile can do. People don't genuinely know the possibilities yet of the Experience API. Portals as well. Nothing makes me happier when I meet someone from one of our clients and have no idea that they're using our software. So the European Red Cross is a big client. They have about 500,000 users on our system. When I meet people from the Red Cross, they're clueless that they've been using our software for the last 8 years because they just go to the Red Cross website, they access their learning through the website. It's just the Red Cross website. The fact is, the LMS is powering the learning objects behind the system. The same, we work with a number of churches. When you go to the BBC website, you do training. It's an LMS behind that. So Portal is a key part of that. And connected to the open API, we have the connectors. Make sure you're future-proofing yourself to be able to work with the new technologies coming along. Be they, a few years ago, everyone wanted to work with WebEx training, but now people want to use GoTo training because it seemed to be cheaper. Keep your options open. And the adapters. Those adapters could be anything from payment gateways to being able to work with hashing type passwords, you name it, depends what you want to use, or using those, when you, if you bank with certain banks, you have the one-time pass keys. You might have a section of your audience needs to have very tight encryption. Well, maybe use that kind of technology in the business. Or QR codes. We have some clients in the US where they have the ID badges, and they have the security tag like I have here, not a QR code, but a security tag. When they go into the training, they have the photo, it's in a hospital, they have the security tag, swipe that and they go into the training and it takes attendance and register. It can be that simple what you're doing with people. So if an LMS needs to evolve, it needs to do many different things. For example, in Hong Kong airport, when someone is non-compliant and they try to go airside at the airport to go on the other side of security, they swipe their security pass on the door to go airside, the door won't open. So hooking through into the security management system. So no one who is unqualified or not certified can even go near an aircraft. The regulations are very strict. You touch an aircraft, you have to document it in the book of records system for the aircraft. So they don't want anyone going near an aircraft that is not certified or qualified. The same for the apron staff, the people on the ground. They've got to be certified as well. A very large bank with about 120,000 people used our LMS for its global flu vaccination system. Nothing to do with learning, but they have various ERP systems, various HR systems. The one global system they had was the LMS, and they used it to roll out the inoculation system for flu around the world. And all they did was they attached a certification to it, so they knew when it's expiring. So now they can track whether people's flu inoculations were expiring within the organization. Dead simple, nothing to do with training development, but what they use an LMS for. And the last part, managing temporary employee transfers between branches. Well, actually, this is now seen to be, when this, I took this off a slide from a couple of years ago, this is now seen to be a standard part now of performance management, that people can track where they're going with internal branch transfers. A few years ago, it was considered to be a non-core functionality. So that's a whirlwind tour of why I think LMSs are naturally evolving. I think we have a challenge over the next year or so. I think, and I said, Tin Can, Experience API is going to be key to that. But also, it's changed in how we view social and informal learning. If we talked about social and informal learning just a year ago, there's a very strong argument that it should have been within the LMS performance management system. Now with Tin Can, there's an endless possibility for everyone. So, any questions from the floor? Stunned silence, some nodding and a bit of shaking heads, but generally stunned silence. If you want to have a chat with me, I'm around here and I'm over on stand 13. So thank you very much, everyone.